Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. Hour number 2 of today's program. It is Friday, my friends. Last episode of the week. If you missed anything during the week, of course, first we have to publicly shame you for doing that. But after we give you the appropriate amount of shame, which is a pretty high amount, I've got to say, I will tell you, if you've missed anything, in all seriousness, you can check it out on our website, toddhuffshow.com, or go anywhere that you listen to podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, wherever, if you want to listen to and download, subscribe to this show, this podcast. All right, we're talking today, spent the last hour talking about James Comey, the lawlessness of the left. I want to talk this hour about a couple of things, but I want to start by talking about the suspended Milwaukee County Circuit Judge. Her name is Judge Dugan, Judge Hannah Dugan. Hannah, by the way, we have 3 kiddos. 3 kiddos. My youngest, I was tasked with naming the youngest. Our second child, my wife named. Now, we agreed, but she named. The first one we, I guess, mutually had lots of discussions about. The second one, story that happened that I won't get into, but basically the name was there, and we just basically said, yeah, that's the name. The third one, I had to choose the name. And Hannah was a finalist. But I couldn't bring myself to name, I love the name Hannah, but Hannah Huff was a little much for me to name that little baby, so we didn't go with Hannah. But Hannah here, Hannah Dugan, Judge Hannah Dugan, has been suspended for concealing a person from arrest and obstruction of justice. And this person was an illegal alien she's trying to prevent, ostensibly, allegedly, this person from facing the consequences of being in this country illegally. This is considered by some on the left, I guess, the equivalent of the modern, what would be a modern-day Rosa Parks movement. So I want to talk about this, the lawlessness of the left. They're calling for lawlessness. We'll get to that, my friends, in due course. Before I get there, though, before we get started, friends, it's important to take care of your heart's health. Your heart is, incredibly important. Heart disease is a big killer, a big problem in this country today, and it's wise to take steps to prevent it. And there's lots of things you can do, diet and exercise, but you can also take some supplements. Now, you may need to go to the doctor and get medication. That's certainly the case for some folks as well. But if you're looking at starting at the least expensive, the least intrusive, the safest places, consider starting with Solti. Solti is an all-natural supplement that is good for your heart's health. It is a supplement. It is not a drug, and science has proven, hear me say this, science has proven that it has lowered cholesterol for folks, and it may be able to do the same thing for you. All you have to do is go to their website, Solti.com. SOLTEA, Solti.com. Use my name, Todd, during the checkout process. You're going to save 50% on your purchase, and you're going to get free shipping on that product to boot. That's 50% off your first 3 months supply, I should say. This is very affordable. It works. I've taken the product for a good while. I think you should consider taking it too. Solti.com, promo code Todd. All right. So let's get here into this story. Headline here, this is at wokespy.com, entitled Judge Dugan, accused of obstruction for aiding illegal alien, seeks dismissal on odd grounds. Suspended Milwaukee County Circuit Judge charged with aiding an illegal immigrant, Hannah Dugan, has filed a petition to dismiss her case, citing extraordinary circumstances. A grand jury recently indicted the county judge for concealing a person from arrest and obstruction of justice. If convicted of the two charges, she faces up to 6 years in prison or a fine of $350,000. This is no ordinary case, and Dugan is no ordinary criminal defendant, the petition stated. It also makes outrageous claims that the government's prosecution of the Milwaukee County Circuit Court judge was virtually unprecedented and entirely unconstitutional, and violates the 10th Amendment and fundamental principles of federalism. So it's violating federalism, I guess, to hold a local judge accountable to federal law. Is that what this argument is supposed to be saying here? How preposterous and ridiculous could this be? Additionally, it claims that Judge Dugan is, quote, entitled to judicial immunity for her official acts. However, after entering her plea, Dugan refused to answer questions about whether she had judicial immunity. Now, the writer here says, I'm not an attorney, but I believe the alleged obstruction occurred outside her official duty as she was not presiding over a case challenging the suspect's detention due to his immigration status. Seemingly, the judge should have waited for a case challenging his detention and set him free by ruling in his favor, instead of injecting herself into a matter that was not before the court. Similarly, the judge is not responsible for escorting defendants out of the court through a non-public entry. If it were, she could have just ordered it through an official ruling. Additionally, Dugan is a county judge and not a federal judge, suggesting that she did not have the authority to stop the arrest of an illegal immigrant by federal authorities. That, by the way, is a great point. Again, I've outlined this quite a bit on this program, but the Supreme Court has made it clear that immigration law is to be enforced by the federal government. Now, the left liked this when they were running the federal government. The Democrat Party liked it. They liked to be able to say, look, don't be enforcing. This is what they told Arizona. This is what the whole problem, the brouhaha between President Obama at the time, and Jan Brewer, governor of Arizona. This is what it was about back in the day. Obama would not enforce federal law, immigration law. The state of Arizona tried to do it. They went to court, and the court said, you can't enforce it. That's the job of the federal government. And so the federal government said, yep, it's our job. And then the federal government said, we're not going to do it. So we've all been suffering because of this. And I will add this as well. The court, the left, I should say, the left was very content to have the fact be that the federal government would enforce immigration law be the case when they were the ones who were calling the shots. And they would happily ignore it, just as they did under Biden's presidency. And now you've got the opposite taking place. You've got the federal government enforcing the immigration law. In fact, you've seen our borders secured. In fact, it's so obvious that they can't even ignore it. They can't deny it any longer. It is undeniable. It is impossible to realize. It's impossible not to realize, I should say, that the border is secure. That you've heard media people say this. You've heard even politicians, leftists, admit this. It's undeniable. This is what happens when things work as they should. But, of course, the people who are looking for ways to defend those who are in this country illegally will now use their positions as a local official, as a city official, as a state official, as someone who's not in the federal capacity, who's supposed to be enforcing and dealing with the illegal immigration issue, insofar as that's their particular responsibility. Now the people who are engaging, are often local judges. So, which way is it? Turns out they're not looking for a way, like just to say once and for all, it should be this way or that way. It should just be in their minds, whatever it takes to stop Trump from deporting people. they're willing to justify whatever measure is possible. They are lawless, my friends, in this, and they're defending their lawlessness. It's not the only place this sort of stuff has happened. There's a similar in the case that it's a judge and it's sheltering, aiding, and abetting, allegedly, an illegal alien in the state of New Mexico. This is how this stuff happens. And so, this is another example of how the left is engaged. Not every person on the left, but certainly people on the left are engaged in lawless behavior. It's basically an extension of their temper tantrums. They throw their temper tantrums. They've been rejected by the American voter. They throw their temper tantrums. People don't pay attention. They try to cry wolf and tell people that the end of civilization, the end of life, the end of our democracy is upon us. None of that is true. And so they can't get their attention. They can't get people to act. They have no control in the federal government. They're watching this stuff happen. And so what do? I say they, but those that say that they're justified to step in and do what is morally right, which is interesting because a lot of these leftists are godless leftists. And if there is no God, how can there said to be any morality? Who's the lawgiver if there is not a lawgiver? Where does the law come from? What do we even mean when we talk about right and wrong if we can't come to a conclusion as to what that is, because who's the one who has written it? So that's what's going on with the judges, or this particular judge. Now, there is even more things that are happening that the left is engaged in. We've got people within. Now, we've known this for a while. I talked about in the last segment, we talked about Tulsi Gabbard, right? Tulsi Gabbard was on talking about James Comey and how James Comey should be arrested for posting basically a call to assassinate President Trump with the letters, or the numbers, I should say, 8647, which is a call, which is basically a billboard, a post on social media calling to eliminate or murder Trump. That's what that was. She's saying he should face the law. He should face the law on that. He's claiming he had no idea, by the way, but he knew it was a political message. We talked about that in the last hour. So Tulsi Gabbard's in the news, but she's also in the news. She's in the news addressing that with James Comey, but she's also in the news because she has fired people within her department who were effectively standing in the way of the Trump administration. And I want to get to this in a moment. Before I do that, though, my friends, nothing is more important than a good night's sleep. That's where we recharge our batteries to fight the battles of the day, whether it's raising our families, working hard in our business, in our jobs, in our classrooms, standing up for what's right in this country. And MyPillow helps us get that good night's sleep. They've got everything you need, from patented pillows, luxurious towels, and unbelievably comfortable slippers that feel like, well, Oz would say walking on clouds. She's got them on today. She's got them on every day. So let's not forget, these products are made right here in the good old U.S. of A. So you're not just buying comfort, you're supporting American jobs, American values. That's another reason to consider shopping at MyPillow, my friends. So go to MyPillow.com, use promo code Todd for big savings on the products there on their website. Do not wait, whether it's for your sleep, your mornings, or just a little bit of extra comfort. MyPillow has you covered. MyPillow.com, promo code Todd, my friends. Again, MyPillow.com, promo code Todd. So let's get back to this. Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, Department of National Intelligence, she has recently fired a couple of high-ranking people in the department. Now, this has John Brennan highly upset. This is at thedailyfetch.com. John Brennan is one of those people, I'm almost certain he was one of the 51 intelligence experts that signed that letter back in 2020 telling us that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. It was fake news. It was propaganda. That's what that's what John Brennan, I should say, former CIA director, was saying back then. This guy is in my opinion, a major hack. This guy is an incredibly far to the left, he's a radical leftist. And he's upset that they're dismantling the deep state. People who are in the government, who are working to obstruct the president, Donald Trump's ability to carry out his agenda. Now, we've been through this before. I just want to hit it really briefly. A lot of people, I know you know this, most of you know, some of you are newer to politics. Look, it's interesting doing this. I've got people who know a ton about these things, right? You've studied this your whole life. You've been around this. You know how they play the games. You know the name of the game. You know all that stuff. I've got some people that have picked up on some of it. They're learning other things. It's a process. And then there's some that are brand new to the discussion, brand new to the fight. And they don't know. So the media and the Democrat Party, two of the 7 pillars of propaganda, the government, and as run by the left, and the media, they would be happy if you believed that we had 4 branches of government. But we have 3 branches of government. You can look to your Constitution for this. In Articles 2, 3, and 4, you'll see that there is a legislative branch, which is comprised of the Senate of the United States of America and the House of Representatives. At one point in time, senators were elected. By the way, each state gets 2 senators. This was a compromise that was made to get the big states and the small states all on board to sign on, ratify the Constitution. Senators get 2, each state gets 2 senators, I should say, and each state gets a number of representatives that is proportionate to their percentage of the population, overall American national population that abides in their state. So there are 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. That's what it's been capped at. And so if your state is 10% of the population, you would get 43, I guess, or 44, depending upon how the rounding works, representatives in your state. If your state has 5%, you would have, 22 or 21 or whatever representatives in your particular state. That's how that works. That's the legislative branch. The senators used to be elected by state legislatures, but that was done away with through a future constitutional amendment, or an amendment after the time of the ratification of the Constitution. Anyway, so that's the legislative branch. Then there's the courts. I'm saving the executive for last because that's the one I want to talk about. There's the court system, the judiciary. The judiciary includes the Supreme Court, but also lower federal courts. This is the branch that's there to interpret and to apply the law in a particular circumstance, where there's a disagreement as to how a particular event or a series of circumstances applies. Something comes up, one law says this, one law says that, the Constitution says this, and it becomes a little fuzzy. The courts are there to try to navigate that, to hear arguments of how each side thinks that it's right, and then come to some sort of a conclusion. The Supreme Court being the highest court, but there's also federal courts and so forth as well. Lastly, there's the executive branch. The executive branch is the branch that's led by the president. All of the bureaucracy is in in the executive branch. This would be the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, the DHS, all of these things, these acronyms, NASA, they all fall under the executive branch. The job of the president, one of the jobs of the president, is to take the law that was passed by Congress and help to implement it. And so these agencies, while they've swollen out of control, they've metastasized and just sunken this country financially and through the size and scope of government. The bureaucracy is the mechanism, the tool through which the executive branch actually sees to it that the things enacted by Congress are getting done. So that's the executive branch. And that, you'll note, is also there's not a fourth branch of government. There's not another branch of government that you can look to or turn to that says this is the administrative state. The executive branch is the branch under which all of these departments fall under. And so obviously, the chief executive of the executive branch, which would be the president, has the ability to, well, he's overseeing those. They work for him, technically. Now, they work for him insofar as, they're fulfilling the law and doing, sometimes Congress has to approve something that a particular agency is tasked with doing and all that sort of stuff. But I don't want to get into the weeds. I'm simply trying to say that this is not a fourth branch of government. And so if you have people within that branch, just think about how illogical this is. If you have people who are in that branch that are blocking the objective, the policies, the agenda of the administration running the branch, that's a major problem. And when people talk about the deep state, that's effectively what they mean. They mean there are people that are embedded within the executive branch who are impeding the president's ability to fulfill his agenda. Now, he can fulfill his agenda insofar as it doesn't violate whatever laws there might be. But if the president wants to, reshape something or get rid of people that are obstructing his legitimate ability to lead and to shape the particular agency or the bureaucracy at large, then he's got every right to do that. So that's the background. I'll get to after the break here. I'm going to have to get to the soundbite here because John Brennan is not happy. John Brennan, former CIA director, unloads here on Tulsi Gabbard because she has fired a couple of basically lifetime officials under her particular bureaucracy, the part that she oversees. And Brennan's upset about this. He says he's trying to frame this as Trump and his team effectively getting rid of people that don't toe the line, getting rid of people that just simply have disagreements or who might expose something that is being done illegally within a particular agency or the government or whatever. This, of course, is framed as some authoritarian behavior, but if you see it as I just described earlier, it makes perfect sense that the executive should be able to shape this agency however he sees fit within the confines of the law, but saying to get rid of people that are opposing your agenda seems to be pretty basic. I got to take a timeout, though. Quick timeout, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friend. We're talking about the lawless ways that the left is behaving. We talked about Comey in the last hour, James Comey, former FBI director, calling for the assassination of Trump. I mean, I don't see any other way to look at this, unless he's just an idiot buffoon who knew it was a political message but didn't know it was calling for the assassination of Trump. That's number one. Number two, we talked about a judge in Milwaukee County who has been charged and is dealing with charges related to effectively trying to interfere with the federal government enforcing immigration law in the protecting someone who was in the process of being deported. She intervened in ways that she should not have, allegedly. And now we're talking about how the people within the bureaucratic state, we call this the deep state, or at least you don't have to call it the deep state, but that's why these things, that's why people call it the deep state, because there's this governmental entity, this the state, the governmental entity, and you got people in it that have embedded themselves deeply that are obstructing what the president wants to do and are basically daring you to do something about it. Well, Tulsi Gabbard, Department of National Intelligence, has said, I'll do something about it, and she's fired a couple of these people. So this is the dailyfetch.com. This is in today's stack of stuff. Former CIA Director John Brennan erupted after ODNI Tulsi Gabbard fired 2 high-ranking intelligence officials reportedly linked to anti-Trump efforts. The firings, described by some as a purge of the deep state operatives, have sparked intense backlash, particularly from Brennan, who appeared visibly angry, shockingly, during an MSNBC interview. Gabbard removed acting National Intelligence Council chair Mike Collins and his deputy Maria Langen-Rieckhoff, both of whom were accused by whistleblowers of political bias and undermining the Trump administration. Just what I was talking about previously. Fox News reported that the officials were, quote, radically opposed to Trump and involved in efforts that blurred the line between intelligence work and political activism. The intelligence leadership shakeup is part of Gabbard's broader move to shift the agency under tighter control by relocating it to the office of the Director of National Intelligence. This transition aims to prevent what Gabbard has described as the politicization of intelligence. Collins' name has come up in connection to the controversial 2020 letter that dismissed Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation. Pretty sure Brennan signed that one too. Officials say he worked closely with former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morrell, who helped organize the letter that claimed the laptop, quote, had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. Remember this, we talked about this. We talk about this, I mean, it comes up regularly because these are the experts. This is what the experts tell us. They tell us so many things that aren't so. And I find it interesting that some guy with a microphone in the Midwest has a better idea about whether or not something is true and accurate than the experts. How am I, and how are you, how are we capable of being more objective and more in the know about what is actually true and not as it pertains to intelligence issues than these alleged experts are? Makes no sense unless, of course, they've got a political motive, which bingo, circle gets a square if that's your conclusion. The narrative has since been challenged by multiple sources, including whistleblowers from within the intelligence community. In addition, whistleblowers allege that Collins was the subject of complaints for deliberately undermining the incoming Trump administration. You can't do this. It should go without saying you cannot do this. You can have disagreements, but you're a subordinate. You're not a fourth. That's why I went through the whole thing about the setup of the government. You're not a fourth branch. You can't challenge the president. If the president's breaking the law, you could be a whistleblower or something, but you can't just say, I'm going to sabotage your presidency because I don't like your agenda. That's fine, but it's not fine, but if you want to think that outside of the government, then have at it. But if you work for the government, your butt needs to be kicked to the curb. And that's what Tulsi Gabbard did. The reaction from John Brennan was swift and emotional. Appearing on MSNBC, Brennan blasted Gabbard's decision. The whole thing just makes me livid, he told host Nicole Lawless, former make-believe Republican, expressing deep frustration over what he sees as a dangerous precedent. This is what we're told. How to view this issue. That the issue is that the Trump administration, Tulsi Gabbard, are setting a dangerous precedent. See, I would think that if you have someone in office, someone working in the deep state who is actively undermining the absolute right of the president, the head of the executive branch, that is the dangerous part of this equation. But that's not what Brennan thinks, which, of course, that's not shocking. He's not going to ever be on the side of the administration. Again, the Seinfeld-Newman strategy should be understood here. For those of you who don't watch or listen to the program, I should say, I'm a big fan of Seinfeld. Seinfeld's nemesis was a guy named Newman. Newman worked for the post office. In one of the episodes of Seinfeld, Newman was being considered for a transfer from New York, which is where Seinfeld lived. Newman lived in the same building as Jerry Seinfeld. He was up for a promotion to be transferred to Hawaii. He wanted this promotion, but he realized that since he did so poorly at his job, he probably wasn't going to get it. And that's when he had this conversation with Jerry. And Jerry, wanting to get rid of Newman, said, I will do whatever it takes, as long as it takes me, so long as it takes you, Newman, away from me. And Jerry tried to help him. In fact, Jerry helped him and did a better job, such a good job that the post office knew that it wasn't Newman doing the work, and he got passed over for the promotion. Anyway, when I talk about the Seinfeld-Newman strategy here, that's the left strategy when it comes to Trump. They will do whatever it takes, so long as it takes them, as long as it takes Trump away from the presidency, or at least away from his agenda. Before he was elected, the strategy was to keep him out of the White House. Now that he is elected, the strategy is to keep him from being able to implement his agenda while serving in the White House. So, that being said, here's John Brennan.
This whole thing just makes me livid. It's appalling and outrageous and demonstrates why Tulsi Gabbard never should have been confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. Michael Collins and Marie Langen-Rykoff are two of the most experienced, accomplished, and talented analysts in the entire U.S. intelligence community. With over 60 years of combined experience, they have worked for successive administrations since the 1990s. They have demonstrated time and time again their capabilities, their competence, their integrity, and they have served as role models for a generation of intelligence officers inside of CIA. They're CIA officers by background and by training. And this is going to have real reverberations within the workforce because, as Congressman Hines pointed out, it's clearly a signal to tell analysts throughout the intelligence community, you tell the truth, you provide objective analysis as you're supposed to be doing, you are running the risk of getting fired. And Michael and Maria are really the quintessential analysts that you want to have providing insight and information and analysis to policymakers so they make the right decisions for U.S. policymakers. But this is a very tangible example of such dangerous and insidious corruption within the Trump administration.
Okay, that's the argument. That's what he's saying. And listen, he's free to make the argument. And I'm not against people who have years of experience. I mean, but I don't care how long they've been there. That doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is what they were doing. Were they doing their jobs? And if I'm forced to believe or choose between what John Brennan tells me and Tulsi Gabbard, with all due respect, I know who I'm choosing. I'm choosing to believe Tulsi Gabbard every time. Again, he's free to make these arguments, but he's just making claims. He's making claims just as Tulsi Gabbard's making claims. And so who are we supposed to believe? To me, the choice is pretty obvious. Got to take a break here, my friends. Before I do that, if you are in sales, do you have a system, my friends? Because if you don't, you're leaving money on the table. In fact, you may be causing big problems and headaches for yourself as well. That's why, one of the reasons why I'm a big believer in Matt Easton and Easton University. Matt has developed what I think is one of the absolute best sales training systems I have ever seen. Practical, proven, designed to deliver results. Whether you're new to sales or you're a seasoned professional, the system will help you close more deals, make more money, and take control of your sales career. And if you sign up to become a student through the link I'm about to give you, Matt will personally jump on a call with you a welcome call with you to walk you through your sales process, your sales challenges, and help you get started. So this is exclusive to you, a listener of this program. ToddHuffShow.com/Easton for more information. Again, that's ToddHuffShow.com/Easton, EASTON. Got to take a break, my friends. Quick time out. Back in a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Final segment of the week. I mentioned off the top, it may have been last hour to be candid, that I was going to share something else kind of behind the scenes. We're managing a lot of things here, as you can imagine, as the program is, we're adding stations, and we're just, there's a lot going on here. And one of the things that's been going on, and I'll tell you a really quick story here and kind of maybe tease an announcement here that'll be coming next week, but or what's coming next week. But before I did this program, I've shared with you a little bit about our history. Look, I'm not someone who has, I studied this stuff in college. I have had my fair share of discussions and arguments and had to defend my ideas about politics with folks. But I've never been in politics. I served as a school board member, so I guess you could say that was politics. But I was 22 and it was a different, I guess technically it was political, but not really. But when I was younger, I thought I was going to get into politics and try to fix things to the best of my ability within our system. But as I've grown and developed and kind of found where I think my sweet spot is, my sweet spot, I believe, is communicating these concepts and ideas and discussing these things and trying to teach a little bit about them and all that sort of stuff. So, but before my path to doing this was a unique one, I think, because I had gone to college and my plan was to go at the time to law school. Actually, initially my plan was to go to one of the academies. I'd been accepted to West Point and Annapolis. The Air Force Academy wouldn't have me, so I didn't get in there, but I got my nominations and all that stuff back in 97, and got appointed to, had the ability to go to either the Naval Academy or West Point, but I was medically disqualified during one of the final phases, the physical phase. And I'll tell you, it was I was disqualified medically for sleepwalking. I was a frequent sleepwalker back in those days. And anyway, I didn't go to the academy. Instead, I went to Butler. I studied political science there. It took me to D.C. Through a program, a pre-law program. The plan then was to go to law school. I had a bunch of leftists in D.C., or at least liberals, versus me every day in the class. It's where I really cut my teeth and honed in on how to communicate, understood what people on that side of the aisle thought, and I learned a lot during those years. But I also learned it at Butler, a lot of the things that I've read, a lot of my personal experiences. But I got introduced to this business when I was on a farm. Because when I graduated, my plan was to go to law school, but I decided I just didn't think that was the path for me. And so I graduated having no idea what I was going to do. Ended up on a horse farm, a 200-acre horse farm. We raised standard-bred horses. We sold most of them. Every once in a while, the owner would keep some to race here locally at Hoosier Park in Anderson. And I started listening out there to talk radio. It was me and the horses and a whole lot of fence rows. And I started listening to talk radio. And I thought, this is what I want to do. This is kind of what I was doing before, all that sort of stuff. But it was a process for me. I'd never been trained in radio. Podcasting was something that hadn't been invented or at least available to the masses at that point. So I took the scenic route, and it wasn't until 2015 that I started this, about 10 years ago now. But in between there, I did a couple of different things. And one of the things that I did, I owned a small, we did branded apparel, merchandise, some marketing services. And we sold that company 6 years ago. 6 years ago tomorrow, actually, we sold the company. And, I never intended to get back into the business or to offer those products and services again. But, as things would develop, and has been my experience with life, some things change and opportunities are viewed a little bit differently. So we had a 6-year non-compete. And so we are going to be, I'll officially announce this next week, but we're going to be providing those services, opening up a division to provide logoed apparel, promotional products, print, some marketing services through a new company that is called Red, White, and Brand your logo on almost anything. And I put almost in parentheses because it's virtually everything. In fact, it probably is everything, but there every once in a while is an opportunity, or I should say a situation where I couldn't find how to get something done. But that's what we're building. It's called Red, White, and Brand. The site is under development. It should be up here in the next couple of weeks. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time, but it's in the same space, and we provide discounts to the people who advertise with this program. We also serve other people, but that's something that we could help you with as we launch the site here in the days and weeks to come. We're here to help you as well. It's called Red, White, and Brand. So that's one of the other things that I've been working on here behind the scenes as well. And appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kind of share that with you. But there will be more updates on that as the time gets closer. But the non-compete officially ends tomorrow. And so now I am telling you that that's the direction that we are going to go. And so you'll hear some of the ads for us in the days and weeks to come on this program. So there you go. That's one of the other reasons I feel so busy here behind the scenes. But there's the music telling me it's time to wrap up for the week, my friends. Have a great day, great weekend, SDG.